What happened?
Oh no.
There we go. What happened? Who's got YouTube running in the background with the sound on?
Not me.
Not anymore.
I don't normally come on screen.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good riddance. How is everyone?
I could be better. I think I picked up some conference crud from Google I/O, so I'm kind of recovering from that.
The crud strikes again.
Yep.
Well, I hope you feel good enough to get through the show, and then rest of the day, and then maybe tomorrow, and we'll see.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've been missing work, and that's not good because we're up against deadlines. So it sucks.
No, that's not good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely
I'm still not working quite yet, but I am having a really good time playing around with RFW and Gemini. So hopefully turning that into something. Right now, I've got it working as a no-code solution. I just sit there, and Windows H keys are your friend. You put them in any text box, hit Windows H, and you can talk to it. So I put a text input field in my app, and now I just tell it what I want, and it creates the screen. So, and then I added a button that spits out the Dart code. The nice thing about this, unlike normal ChatGPT code or normal Gemini code, is it shows you what you've asked for or what it thinks you've asked for, and you can correct it and keep correcting it until you've got what you want, and then you get the code. So
we should probably start by introducing ourselves.
That's what we usually do.
Let me see here. Simon is on his way. He is running a little bit late for work. Not unusual for Simon. Yes. Hi, Roa. All right. Well, I am Scott Stahl. I am one of the Flutter community leads, one of quite a few. And I am also organizer for GDG Cleveland, and I write code under Good Dog Apps. And we rescue pit bulls, which is probably the most important thing in all that. And apparently I don't put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Next.
Well, I'm Randall Schwartz. I've been a Google developer expert in Dart and Flutter since the beginning of the program. So it's 5.5 years now. And got to meet a lot of my peers down at both Google I/O and at Connect. So that was a lot of fun too. So that was a very interesting experience. Very happy to be doing that. I'm also a full-time Flutter developer, and I have a 45-year career. So I've been writing code for a long time.
Wait a minute. Right. That means that you're probably qualified to go take over some of the COBOL jobs.
And I never got into COBOL. There was a version of COBOL that ran on the HP 2100 system that we had, but I never actually saw more than identification division and all the other stupid COBOL things there. So no, I didn't. No, I never learned COBOL. My first programming language was Pascal, actually.
I did have a couple of COBOL jobs that I had for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. I worked for the city of Oklahoma City it was on a PDP-8. So when I was at the Computer History Science Museum, there's a PDP-8 there after I/O. So seeing that kind of brought back memories and how you had to boot it with toggle switches and all kinds of stuff. And then I had another job that they had bought like a COBOL package of stuff, and they needed reports out of it. But the problem was they didn't have a COBOL compiler. So I ended up basically taking what they could do with their built-in like COBOL, their report generation thing, taking that, tearing it apart with awk, before Perl, not Randall. You probably remember awk. Tearing it apart with awk, and then outputting what I needed. So that was an interesting job where I needed some COBOL, but they didn't have a COBOL compiler, so I didn't even have to actually write COBOL. I just had to be able to understand it.
I wrote a scheduling program in awk that actually could give you week by weeks the apparent load of the total across our group as graphs and stuff. I did it all with awk. It was crazy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yes,
that
I was an
was
awk
yeah,
expert before Perl.
exactly. Yeah. Well, iterations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Danielle Cox, and I am a full-time Flutter developer and a GDE wannabe. And since I learned about the program, which was less than 5.5 years ago. But yeah, so we'll see if that can someday happen or not. If it doesn't, then we'll make the best of it. And if it does, great. I lead a small team of Flutter developers at a startup called Ardley. We're technically a fintech kind of company, but it's the mortgage services are our clients, and we help them hang on to their customers. So it's pretty cool. And I am one of the organizers of a group called the Flutteristas, which is a group of female and non-binary Flutter enthusiasts. So if you're listening and you're not a member and you want to be, there's a forum at flutteristas.org, but hit me up and I'll make sure we bypass the I'll call it security aspects of, making sure that we've looked at everybody and talked to them and stuff like that. So if I talk to you here, we can definitely make that happen a little quicker. We have like monthly meetings and stuff like that. And sort of like Scott said, for me, that's probably my most important, my most important thing here. So, so that's me.
Nice. Yeah. One interesting thing about COBOL is you will always have a job because no one wants to work in it.
Well, I mean, Groove and Chip, when I met Groove and Chip, he was doing COBOL.
He was doing COBOL. And that's, when he needed a job about a year ago, I was saying you could go back to COBOL, and he basically was about to kill me.
Sure.
No, COBOL is not fun. It does not follow any normal structure that I am aware of. It's a massive pain in the neck, but a lot of governments in the U.S., city governments, state governments, they have programs and large programs that run on COBOL.
Right.
So
legacy, basically, it's legacy.
Yeah, very much. But the problem is that COBOL is not type safe. And when people were creating forms and using the forms, like at the New Jersey Driver's License Bureau, they were putting words in the phone number fields and addresses in the name fields, or putting everything in a notes field. And IBM contracted with the state in order to try to modernize it and migrate the database. After 6 months, they gave the state their money back and said it couldn't be done.
If we actually want to address that point, probably the one person that has been paid to write COBOL code should probably talk on that part. Is it fun? I don't think that I don't think that it would. I would call it necessarily fun in and of itself. But when I was doing it, I was able to come up with new paradigms of how they were doing things and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun at my COBOL job. I would say that for sure. And there's been multiple versions since I worked on it, so I can't tell you how it is now per se. But it was definitely a great. I mean, the way it handled its files and databases before we had SQL, stuff like that kind of stuff, was very good for its time, and that's why it was built up that way. And that's why it got so entrenched. And once you're entrenched for 20 plus years as being arguably the best language to use for something, lots of code gets written, and banks, things like that, were the first in the government for parts of the government, not other parts. I could talk about that too. We're among the first to really computerize stuff. And so then you are dragging around a whole bunch of legacy code. So, here we can think of how it is with people that have massive code bases with both their Android and their iOS, and moving it over to Flutter. If Flutter didn't have the way to actually kind of plug in piecemeal, you would have a hard time getting those companies to ever switch over, just because there's so much work to be done. We're now, 30, 40, 50 years later. So we are able to come up with ways to get around that. But if it weren't for that, we'd have the same kind of ways of going with our iOS and Android code. Would be the same kind of things with the places that were the first ones to do it, have these massive investments already in there. Flutter wouldn't have a chance in those companies. If we didn't have the way around that of being able to, what's it called? To be able to build part of it in Flutter and plug it into the rest of it?
Add to app, you mean?
Add to app, yeah.
Add to app, yeah. If we didn't have add to app, that would really increase with a lot of these places, I think, the barrier to entry, if you've been around a lot. So I think that's why it's there. But I don't know that, I don't know. I think that Dart is fun. The stuff I can do with it is fun. So, I think that you bring the fun with you a lot of times when you're working on it, or the job gives you the funner stuff on it. So that's where I would be to actually answer the COBOL question in a serious manner, is that, if that's what you're doing, it can be, sometimes because things are hard, that can make it fun because it's a challenge, without going into too much detail. When I got there, the disk drive was the slow part of the program. And so every time they wanted to do something through the database, it took 6 hours. And I was coming from a Unix world, and I figured out a way to break, instead of just doing everything at once, to break it apart with filtering and shrinking the records and things like that. And when I left, pretty much anything could be done in an hour and a half on the same hardware, same machine, bigger database actually. So, that's fun to be able to come up with stuff like that. And that was COBOL. So.
I'm just remembering disk drives that were really old.
Yeah.
When 20 megabytes was a big drive.
Oh, absolutely. No, in this case, inexpensive at that point. We had a 2K record and 1 million records. And that thing took 6 hours to walk the table. If you just walk the whole table, looking at everything, reading it in and stuff like that. So yeah, it was, but if you can just hit indexes and you can only pull out the fields you need, like I said, I got it from 6 down to an hour and a half, which is, I still put that on my resume, even though that job was 1987, 86, 87. I still put on my resume because it's a fun discussion to have,
Very cool. I could be mean and do something right now because sometimes Simon throws me on screen when I'm in the middle of drinking. Oh, we're both driving again.
You can bring me on whenever you want.
Well, he brought me on before I could mute my YouTube window, so that was having fun.
Because
you never bring me on immediately, so I've had time to go deal with that.
How is everyone doing? Sorry, I was a bit late.
That's all right. I'm doing great, Simon. How are you? And could you please introduce yourself in case there's anybody on this call that doesn't know you?
People don't need to know who I am. It's fine. It's fine. I'm a guy who answers questions. There you go.
Yeah.
And what's your opinion of COBOL? Is it a fun language?
COBOL? No.
Yes.
Hell no. It's still being used in a few places.
2-1, we win.
Oh, I didn't say the language is fun. I said you can have fun.
It's interesting because there's something to be said about having a simple, maybe not COBOL, but a simple language that is so simple it becomes almost easy to predict its behavior, right? So you can have, it's almost like a calculation in terms of a functional language, right? You have an input, you have an output. With the high level stuff that we have now, it's so prone to like special conditions and exceptions, and like it's not as simple as here's a function that does A, input A, get B out, It's very testable, very predictable, right? And functional languages try and follow that same thing, right? So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, we've been just sitting back, talking COBOL. One thing for people who are just joining, I do want to point out Victor was not able to make it today. We're pushing that to next week. So all of the discussion about
he's feeling a bit poorly.
Yeah. He say he lost his voice, actually, more importantly. So it's kind of hard to answer questions on screen when you don't have a voice.
You don't need a voice for that. You can just nod or go on that. Just play, was it like yes? What's the yes no games? I don't know.
or for everything we can just point to Simon.
I'll give you an opinion on everything. It doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We didn't go through the rules either, Scott. If we care about doing that, we didn't go through the rules.
I don't have the slides.
Simon will get the slides up there for us.
Do you want me to do it? You can share them. They are there, by the way. They're built into what we have, but
I'm looking. I'm not seeing.
Yeah.
All right, here we are.
All right. Be nice, be respectful, be a decent human being. Don't post anything that's rude, adult, otherwise against common sense. Don't advertise or promote anything. We all know you need a job or want to sell something to us. Don't spam your same question repeatedly. This one we see a lot. When you ask a question the second time, you go to the bottom of the list. Every time we see a question, it goes to the bottom of the list, even if it was next. Harassment of any kind is not tolerated. If you mess this one up, you'll not only be blocked from here, you will also have your name spread around at all the other places like Discord, Slack, etc., etc. And be sure to have a good time.
Indeed, have a good time. Very important. And
again,
there we are. There's our information. You've gone through this. That's it. Back to the show.
We're here survey except for you, like I said, Simon. So this is Simon, everybody.
Hi, my name's Simon. You don't know me, but I'm here. I'm new.
And of course, our regulars know this, but put a Q in front of the question. Otherwise, especially
he's about as new as 1 month old bread that's furry.
Yeah, Randall's a little under the weather. If you don't put a Q, you might miss it. So make sure you put a Q in front of it. And I'm sorry. And since Randall's, I'm going to help him out here a little bit here. If you put Q in front of the question, so we know to put it into the queue. There we go. That's Randall's dad joke.
Also, just don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I mean, we don't say this enough. And to be honest, liking the video really does actually help the stats and push it up the rankings in YouTube and get it in front of new people. So, and we said this another time, share it with friends. If you go into somebody who does Flutter who doesn't know about the show, share it with them right now. Grab this link.
Share it with friends. Share it with your
family. Check out the show. You can get your answer, question answered. Yeah,
absolutely.
Share it with your enemies. I don't care.
Just share it.
And I want to say, as the one that could probably be subject to more harassment than any of the other people on the call, I want to say that I'm so glad that the number 5, I think it was, which is the no harassment on our rules, never comes up. So thank you all in the community for being amazing.
It has come up one time in 6 years.
Yeah. So we put it there to make sure to remind everybody stuff like that. But I mean, our community is amazing, and thank you all.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. Somebody was asking why Dart is not popular, considering that Dart went from being rated the worst language to learn to the best one in about 1 year. I would have to disagree with that statement.
I mean, where's those rankings from Stack Overflow about being the fastest growing language and really popular for the last 2 or 3 years? Yeah.
Yep.
And by the way, when it went from being the worst language to learn to being one of the fastest growing ones, both of those were correct.
Well, and that's at the time it was worse. It was not type safe.
Yeah.
Well, it was not.
It was a smarter JavaScript. It was a smarter JavaScript. That's it. Yeah.
And I didn't know it back then, but everybody I talked to tells me that it was not a fun language back then, and now it's a great language.
It's far, far better than it used to be.
It was fine where it was. Right, it's still a good language and far better than what we've had in others. Right, like we had what you had with Dart 1. You go check it out. I think and still use it. In fact, but what we had with Dart 1 was it was a mix between. It's basically a mix between JavaScript and TypeScript in the sense that it wasn't type safe. However, you had all the introspections from the language server. So you had here are all these functions, here are all these classes and things that you can just type in. Whereas when it came to JavaScript, you just don't get any of that from from most IDEs, right? Like it's really difficult for it to like analyze and actually work that way because it has to run to actually know what's there with language differences. Anyway, doesn't matter. Right.
Hey, we have somebody breaking one of the rules, but fortunately they're on a part of the broadcast that almost no one can see.
Right. Shall
Bye-bye.
we crack on with some questions?
Sure. Wow. I'm seeing some of these questions that are basically just evidence that people aren't paying attention to some of the packages out there. But we have an interesting question from someone named Flutterfly.
I don't know who that is.
Right.
Nope. Any
Maybe you should
tips
read
for
it yourself.
understanding the
No,
focus
no.
tree? Oh, yeah. Why don't you read it?
I can read it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's your question. For those that don't know.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, I am Flutterfly. Yeah. Any tips for understanding the focus tree, specifically keyboard focus or a screen reader, and how can I inspect the Flutter or the focus tree? Because what, and just I guess a little more context on this is what I'm seeing is when I start tabbing around, the tab, it seems to like disappear. So somebody else is taking focus, and then I get to where I want, after a few other tabs, things like that. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to understand where my focus is going so I can deal with that. So I understand how to deal with it once I've got there. I just don't know how to understand what's happening.
It's interesting. See that it's kind of interesting because the way focus works changes based on the platform you're running on as well. Like focus works differently on mobile to desktop, right?
Right.
When you have a keyboard and mouse, focus is different from when you have to have a soft keyboard or a touch input, right? Like there's nuanced differences that take place. I think Focus Manager had literally changed the mode. There's like a desktop mode versus touch mode or something like that, if I remember rightly. I'm talking about visualize. I thought you could get that from the just inspector tools that were built in.
I didn't see it with but I don't know.
I feel like they added that. Like there's a tab for it or something. But maybe we have to go looking. But this is kind of interesting. I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those. We always put so much into all the conferences, like accessibility, and I'm one of those people that I don't spend enough time doing it. It's what makes it functional, what makes it like least common thing. Least like the ways I make focus work is like on forms and things like that, where you need it to, you want to be able to tab through and actually navigate nicely. And you can use I forget the widget now. It's like descendant group or something like that, isn't it? There's like a focus descendant group.
That sounds about right.
It's a widget which lets you say, oh, I want this to descend in the widget order or left to right visually order or to top to bottom visually order and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm gonna look that up.
And I guess if we're talking about some of these things with dealing with stuff like that, the widget I learned at I/O was the focusable action detector, which I had not used that before, and that is a great widget for if you're trying to add in shortcuts and hover states and focus states and things like that. That's one I had not heard about, and I saw it used in one of the programs we watched there, and it was.
Do you know what they need to do? Do you know what they really need to do? Is each release, here's a list of new widgets that we put into this new release. That would be super helpful.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just not done enough, is it?
Well, I mean, and if it was, even if it might have been, it might not have clicked with me at the point of how cool it was because it combines. There's actually a widget of the week for it too, but I'd missed that, and it's cool how it combines multiple things together.
Focus traversal group. That was the widget I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Those that are playing on long home, you can go find the docs for it. There, I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, but so the question came up, which was how can I inspect the focus tree? You can do a dump of the focus tree. I know that one. There's actually like a text dump that you can get, like a text tree representation.
I'd be happy with that for right now.
What was the command I did? Oh, this is going to take me back. Oh, hey, Hey, that's really helpful. I found something new. Should we share? Hang on, let's share. This will be helpful to everyone. I mean, might as well.
Drum roll, please. And maybe a screen share.
That's where we're going. I'm getting there. Go on, slow down.
Okay, let's not hide Danielle.
That's all right. It's not like it's my question or anything, you know.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be helpful?
That'd be very helpful. Absolutely. Awesome. I love it.
So you got a top level flag that you can change to true, and it will cause extensive logging to occur when focuses changes.
That's
This will be useful for debugging focuses. Each time focus changes, the focus tree will be printed, and the request for the focus and focus operation will be logged.
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
I just
awesome.
typed it in the search. No, that printing of the focus tree is something you can actually do. There's an action for it because it's hooked up to the standard widgets binding. I have to go look it up. I can't remember.
Well, the other thing I haven't addressed yet is if I've got a scrollable and I tab through and I focus to something lower, it scrolls down to it. But when it wraps around to the top, it doesn't scroll back up to the top. So that's something I'm going to have to also research. I've not researched.
So that means say that again. It's not wrapping around, going back to the top.
The focus is going back up to the top, but it's not scrolling. It's not, but it's no longer visible.
Oh, yeah. No, that's ensure. That's no, that's a setting. You can do that.
Okay. Like I said, that one I haven't researched at all yet. So.
Well, if I find this, I'll bring it up. But we should just carry on. I think.
Okay.
Oh, man, I can't remember. It's really bugging me now.
Well, that debug option looks amazing. So that's going to work great for me, Simon. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember where the print functions are. It's like debug. It's like there's some global functions you can call to output like the render tree and the accessibility tree. And for the life of me, I can't remember where they are. If anyone knows, chuck it in the chat and it escapes me right now. We could go hunting for them if maybe after this. Yeah, no. No, I can't find it. That was it. Highlight mode. Focus. Oh, yeah, that's it. So let's bring this back up just while we're here. Yeah, this is it. Focus manager highlight mode indicates the current interaction mode, including highlight strategy, right? So you can fiddle around with these. Always traditional, that's your desktop, and always touch, which is your sort of model, which accounts with touch and traditional. When displaying focus information, here touch will not show focus highlight except when the controllers bring up the soft keyboards. Traditional interface keyboard and mouse will show the current focus via the highlight of some sort. If a touch device like a mobile phone, it has a keyboard and mouse attached, you can enter traditional mode if the user has these input devices. Anyway, yeah, so you can flip between those. Really bugs me that I can't find this thing. I'll find it soon, I'm sure. What's the next question then?
The next question. How do we do performance tests for Dart server? Go or Dart backend for a project like Stack Overflow? I don't know about Go, but boy, where's Victor when we need him?
Agreed. That'd be a great question for next week.
Yep.
Supposed to be this week.
Sorry. Something's changed. I screwed up my IDE settings. Is that nice?
Go back to the old UI.
It's not the UI that's the problem. Damn it. What was the question again? Sorry. I'm not looking at that.
How do we do performance testing for a Dart server?
Well, write some benchmark tests. I mean, you're basically just doing unit tests that work out how long things took to execute. There you go. I'm not sure I'm seeing the difficulty here. I mean, maybe it's obvious to me. Sorry, that's just so
Expert's
you basically
disease.
you're so you could go pick up any one of these things, but you're basically doing benchmarking, right? Which is you write essentially unit tests that have an output, and that output will be it running the same like handler, your API server handler or something like that, 20 times, and giving you the median and the maximum minimum, like the different 99th percentile, give you those numbers, and that gives you your performance expectation. And if you're suddenly what you can do then is if you've got this running as part of your testing chain, then you say, okay, there's a margin of error. You can go say 20 milliseconds either side of that of your median or whatever. And then, yeah, if it goes above that, then it fails to test, right? And then you can put your performance test as part of your pipeline and know that you've introduced something that slowed everything down. Right.
And if you the unit test is a great idea because that's going to give you a relative performance. But if you're deploying it to something that's different than where you're running your CI/CD from, that could also, a different configuration of that could cause different issues. So you could take those same tests and basically make something more similar to an integration test that you could run and actually talk back and forth with it. Just to actually run it on the actual real hardware if you're noticing different results than you're seeing with your CI/CD.
A little bit of a follow-up comment here. So the thing about Dart backend, I'm not sure how it does concurrency.
What do you mean? It does concurrency.
Yeah.
Like any Dart program. If you're thinking about like handling multiple requests coming in at the same time, you've got essentially each request being handled as a coroutine, right? So you can handle too many requests and it will just slow down, right? You won't be able to action all the coroutines at the same time. This is normal async in a way, right? However, there's the thing you're missing probably is I mean it depends on what you're doing. So I'm assuming okay, well I'll show you the first piece here, the puzzle. So server socket is the base type for all stuff you're listening to on networking. And when you go to bind, if I can find the bind function, you get this flag called shared. That should be set to true. This means you can call bind multiple times, and it will create a separate listening handler for the socket. As a new request comes in, it will round robin to the next one. That's done by the operating system. That's automatic for you, right? So you'll see down here it will say something around optional share profile. Additional whether additional server socket objects can bind to the same combination of address port. If shared is true, more server sockets from this isolate and other isolates are bound to the port, then incoming connections will be distributed amongst those bound to the socket. So as it says here, connections can be distributed with multiple isolates this way, and that's the way you solve it. So you spin up an isolate, you have to make sure it's shared true on all your isolates, and then that's it. Simple as that. It will automatically distribute the connections coming in and give you the load balancing that you're looking for. Was that the question? I can't remember what the question was now.
And one of the things that I was pointing out
where's the question?
was,
sorry, where's the?
I'm getting it.
That's
Simon
not the same
does
one.
have expert disease because he said it's as simple as that. It's not so simple to a lot of people.
That's not the same one, is it?
Yeah, the comment, he's looking for the comment about the not sure how it does concurrency.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
Yeah. Well, the last time I had to worry about this, it was all about, Apache threads and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, like you just do isolate.run and have that run code do your server socket.bind with shared. You can spin up as many isolates as you want, as you have capacity for. When you talk about capacity, that's about you to monitor how many requests come in, and how many isolates you're serving, and to have those configurable options that you can then say, oh, given my machine with more, I'm going to run this on a server with 8 CPUs or 10 CPUs, and I can add more isolates or less isolates and so on, right? Equally, you could just not bother and then just scale up based on your cloud compute, right? So you spin up let Cloud Run spin up more instances as required based on the CPU utilization, and then just leave it with the standard one isolate with coroutines, right? It'll be concurrent as much, and it will spin up another instance and keep going. If you're using Shelf, I think Shelf has a way of specifying the socket, or telling it it's shared. I'm going to go just dig that out because I forget. 1 second. What Shelf has a serve? Yes. So serve. Here we go. Let me bring this up briefly. So when you use the shelf.io serve function to serve a handler, it has shared flag there. There you go. And that's how it passes that on to the socket so that you don't need to do anything special. There you go. Does that help? Yeah, Raf said when we're talking about earlier on, we talked about performance, you can use other programs to do performance tests. Sure. Yeah.
Nice. Alrighty, moving on. Could you go through scroll widgets and talk a bit about them in terms of capabilities? I have been having huge problems with single child scroll view lately. In relatively simple screens, it refused to render. Only with Impeller, it works fine on Skia. The solution was slivers, but I am still a bit confused why it won't work otherwise. Well, one of the things first is that all of the scrollables are basically using slivers under the hood, and the Flutter team has come out recommending that you use slivers anytime you need scrollables instead of a list view or a single child scroll view. It's a little known thing. It was in some conversation we were doing.
List view's fine. No, list view's fine. List view uses slivers. That's not a problem. The problem is using shrink wrap.
Not according to Greg, but we'll go with it.
Yes.
But anyway.
The whole point is list view, for example, list view.children, list view. So list view normally give it a set of child widgets. Those widgets are instantiated as each one has a sliver automatically. And if you do list view.builder, it does the same thing. It uses the builder pattern to produce the widgets, but they're still all slivers when it builds. The difference with single child scroll view is the entire contents of your single child scroll view is one big sliver, which if you've got lots of content in there, then you're not getting any performance aspects. So if you don't know, we're just going back to the first point here. The whole point of if you've got a lot of, let's say you've got 10,000 items you need to display, 10,000 images you have in like your, here's a good example, your phone gallery, right? You don't go and load 10,000 images. You don't go make 10,000 widgets because the user's never going to see them. They don't need to be loaded, right? What you need to do maybe is have the data or know that there's 10,000 and get the first 20, right? You certainly don't need to make widgets up for all of those. When you scroll down more, then you go, oh, I'm going to load a bit more. I'm going to display a bit more. And that's automatically handled for you when you talk about slivers, right? For the most part. So the idea of slivers is a slice of the scrolling space.
Yes.
And the scrolling space is defined in slivers into the cacheable region, the painted region, and the scrolling region. And it means you can then do effects like snapping, sticky headers, and all sorts of fun things. There you go. I think that's a quick thing. The docs have loads. There's loads of videos.
And to be clear, if I've got something I expect to fit on most screens and I'm just protecting against overflows if something goes wrong, that's still okay to do a single child scroll view wrap it with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's about knowing like the amount of content you're trying to display. It would be a bit ridiculous. This is my point. Like if you had even if you had 100, even if let's say it was 10 elements, and one element is the entire height of the screen. Well, I don't need to make 10 elements, right? Like, so let the sliver stuff do it for you. Use like listview.builder and return your 10 elements automatically. It's done for you magically, right? You don't have to think about slivers. You don't even have to worry about slivers. Listview.builder should be the de facto standard scrolling thing that you go to. Yeah. If you don't want to use the builder pattern, listview.children, but that means you have to build the widgets up front. That's the difference between builder and non-builder. But yeah, for the most part, if you've got like a few elements, like I've got, I don't know, 20 widgets on the screen that are, I don't know, buttons or something, it's a finite set. And I'm happy for my app to use the memory to display 20 widgets because it's not a lot, right? And I can put that scroll view for the idea that if it's on a small screen device, it will then scroll. Single child scroll view, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's because I find that a lot where I just want to protect against it overflowing.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, which is
I expect it to be in most cases to be shown. Yeah.
I mean, if it's only a little bit,
it's a shame that I still irks me that the scrolling system doesn't implement a only if it's large. So lay my stuff out to fill the content and only scroll if it would. If it needs to overflow, right? That's still not something that's built. And you have to. The docs recommend you use a list, a layout builder, and a single child scroll view to kind of solve that problem. Which again is not a great answer anyway. It works. Don't get me wrong, but it's not an optimal solution. So it just irks me that that's still not in the framework, and I should do a PR for it.
Well,
it's open source. You should.
When I find the time.
Yeah. Right. What gets me a little bit is like on a list view, you know, I can't say go to element 27, you know, so
so this is
you know, if they're variable length records, you know.
Yeah, this is actually like, so let's just talk about this a little bit more, because again, for those people that don't know, again, the scrolling, the way that you scroll is based on a pixel offset, right? How much of the visual content have I scrolled through? Well, this means if you want to scroll down the list to a certain point, you need to know how much of that real estate of the screen has been used up in the scrolling space before that scroll point. Well, that's a problem because you don't necessarily know that. And you don't want to calculate that. It's like saying you've got, again, we'll say 10,000 items and you want to go to element 9,000 and you're at element 1. You don't want to have to build, render, and lay out 999, whatever it is, 8,999 items to work out where item 9,000 is in the scrolling viewpoint.
Sure, but in the case of a list view with a builder, it doesn't have to build all of them. If I say I want to go to 9,000, it could actually go to a couple before and build what it needs to after that. I mean,
well, not with it's not about it being in a builder. So builders don't work on. So again, the scrolling offset does not work on that. So you can't say go to element 9,000, right? It has to work on the pixel offset. Now, if you have a fixed height, then you can just say this height times my index gives me the offset expected to be at minus half the height of the screen. Now it's going to scroll to the center, right? So you can do that kind of thing, right? But again, the problem here is you need it to say you can't animate scroll after duration, because then it will just scroll through everything. There's actually an interesting thing. Did we pick this up last time? I can't remember. I had this open actually. They recommend deferred loading for context. I don't know if we did that last week, but there's a flag that you should be, if anyone doesn't know, I'm going to bring this up on stream just because I got it here. Another little something to remind everyone of. If you have images in a list view, you should use the image widget with a scroll-aware image provider that wraps your actual image provider. So that would be an image network.
These are follow-ups from Lucas.
Yeah, you'll back that in a second. The point of this means that what happens is as the scroll velocity increases, it will not load the images. So this is like when we just said about scrolling to 9,000. If you got like 9,000 images, if you did that normally, it would just try and load 9,000. It's pretty dumb. If you use the scroll-aware image provider, when the velocity increases during the animation, it will then stop loading images until it decreases again below a threshold. So that's really handy for doing that kind of thing. Anyway, and you can use that same flag. There's a flag on the context that you can use. Scrollable of context that you can use to actually see if that's set. And that way, when your widgets load, they don't go to the network and do a future if that flag is set until the flag goes off again. So that way, again, you don't have to do stuff unnecessarily when scrolling. Anyway, tried this view as well, but still did not work. The problem is that the builder builds from the list of elements, but when I do many different widgets with different content, it seems strange. I don't know what you mean. Sorry, Lucas. You need to get a bit more than that. Is it that
maybe this would help?
I mean, this sounds to me, if we're actually trying to look at something like that, it sounds to me like this would be a great time. Take your example, go to
pop in a gist.
Yep. Create
Yeah.
just show a gist of this, and we can actually look because.
So yeah, and we can actually have a look at it. Do an example. If you can rush up an example, go to gist.github.com and post a gist, then give us the hash in the chat, and we can look at it. Interesting enough, you mentioned like images there. Something that most people something that an image needs to be loaded to know its width and height because they come from the actual image content. If you can make sure that your data for your content you're displaying already has the width and height, or at least the aspect ratio of the image, then you can reserve that space in the UI, which means the scroll bar doesn't jump around and you don't get any jumping. So if you're getting jumping things, it's probably because the images are loading in and you haven't reserved the space for the image. That could be something that's causing your weird behavior. I don't know.
Yeah, I've definitely started doing that some, is giving some of that information for when I'm building. So I can do a cache network image, but I'm not causing things to go all over the place.
Yeah.
We were having weird things like, something would be centered and then would jump to the left after it loaded and things like that. And it was all because there wasn't enough information given to the, to the, when I was creating the layout, there wasn't enough information to do it. So I've started doing that, and I still keep threatening to, but I'm going to start using blur hash with some of these things.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good option.
Because if I'm keeping the metadata anyway, I can keep an extra 20 or 30 bytes for blur hash.
Yeah, most definitely. It's great. Great idea.
All right. We ready?
Right. Yeah.
After upgrading Flutter to the latest version, I have issues with reloading on the web. Now I either have to kill and relaunch the app or reload the localhost web page. Any solution using VS Code?
I've not had this issue, but I'm not using VS Code either. But I've got one of my developers has also upgraded, and he is using VS Code, and we're not seeing this issue, I don't think.
Whenever reload on web. Jerbs, I wonder if what your problem is more of maybe of one of a plugin or something like that. If you've got a plugin that's like doing HTML or changing content when the hot reload takes place, and it's not dealing with disposing of it correctly and reloading properly, then there's a probability that it's screwing something up when it does a hot reload or something similar. Maybe I can't.
And on the web, it's a restart. It's not really a reload.
That's what I was going to say. Is
that's what I'm trying to say.
Restart.
But that's the problem, right? You lose your Dart. It loses the Dart state when there's a hot restart, but the native code that's running, like JavaScript, is still running.
Oh, so its state has not changed.
You still have globals. You still have the globals that you had before.
No, it's not. It's not Dart globals. There's some like if you've made changes like the HTML page and some other things, or you've got some iframes going, like that kind of stuff, all can get mixed up. So maybe something to do with that. I've not seen this either.
You can always create the sample, counter program and see if that does its hot restart properly. And if
try
that's
fresh,
then you do know it's something probably deeper in. If just a simple program works.
I mean, your first thing is here is like, oh, it's a Flutter version because it did an upgrade. Well, just because you've done an upgrade doesn't mean it's a Flutter bug. It just means that it's revealed the bug to you. Right.
Yeah, and it could be something in a package, as they're saying, that suddenly is no longer compatible with the new version of Flutter because the package isn't updated.
I was gonna say, upgrade your packages. I would go, as I said, the first thing is create a new project, see if that runs and has the similar problems. If it doesn't, then you're kind of working out, it's not necessarily the Flutter version, but your code and the current Flutter version and the way it's set up. It could be that, the VS Code plugin needs updating. If you haven't done that, I know it sounds obvious solution, but maybe if you haven't tried it, try it. Things like that. The other one you can do is clear your pub cache, redo a repair on your pub cache. That also might help. And make sure you do a Flutter clean of your project, because you may have cached information from the previous version of Flutter that you compiled with. This is good information for like every. This is something that I know that me and Scott have dealt with every single time we've done a Flutter upgrade, and that is, as soon as you change your Flutter version, you do a Flutter clean. That deletes your build, that deletes all your temporary files, and you don't get pre-compiled files from different Flutter versions interacting maybe in some weird, funky way, right? So yeah, if you upgrade your Flutter version, Flutter clean always. Every Flutter developer, let's do it.
Yep. And Yerbs, bad Yerbs. You put the question in twice. No coffee tomorrow for you.
Is it herbs, gerbs?
I think it might be Yerbs. I don't know.
Yerbs. All right, let's move on.
All right. What is the alternative to zero cost objects in Dart? For example, inline classes in Kotlin. Now, I believe this one was being discussed in the chat, was it not?
Yeah. I actually answered this already. It's the type extension stuff that used to be called inline classes in Dart previous specifications, and that I believe is already in Dart 3.2 or 3.4, one of those.
Yeah, it's in the latest one. Latest stable has it.
Except you might need to enable. Oh no, you need to enable extensions for macros, but this is already in stable.
Yeah.
So yeah, check that out. It's quite cool actually. I haven't found a practical use for it yet, but
what is a zero cost?
Type extensions, so you can what's the word?
You can wrap an object with additional methods. So it's sort of like class extension, but for individual instances.
Oh, cool.
It's had some quite a bit of documentation on it already, which is nice. There you go. Extension types.
I'll pop this in the chat.
Yep.
I'll see you later. Yeah, absolutely. This is cool.
So yeah, so for example here, ID number extends an integer and gives it this extra operator in this case, and then you can use this around, but actually it's an integer that's just augmented, so that when you use this operator, it actually calls like a static function, right? Like there's zero, you're not making an additional object or there's not additional work to use it, right? And as you can see here, you can just like wrap an object and use it almost as you would, right? Anyway, so I think that this is kind of, what was the question in terms of zero cost? When it comes to also inlining stuff and reducing overhead, const, right? So if you don't know, if you mark a instance of an object as const, from a constructor perspective, you have to make your constructor as a const constructor, and your class has no state, then they can change at runtime, so it's final. It means that what happens is that class or that instance of that class, that instance variable of the class will actually be compiled will be constructed at compile time. Let me get the words out. Sorry. So this means that the cost of actually creating them and the execution running them is known, right? Like it's a finite thing. So you're not going to keep each time that const constructor gets called and used inside the app, it's going to use the same instance. The one that was compiled at compile time is shipped inside your app. And this way, there's no runtime cost to actually using those const constructors. So that can also be very helpful.
It's also helpful when I've done things like type defing ID number to number or to int. And the problem with that is that it's not really a separate type. And so you have to end up, but these inline classes are actually fully, unless you implement the original int it won't go where ints go. It doesn't fit. So it's much nicer for having more control over how you're doing that. And yet it's still zero cost. So like anything that would have been yeah, zero cost. That's it.
Yeah, there you go. Next.
Raf says he's getting old. I'm not going to argue. Can you share your knowledge about garbage collection in Dart and optimization techniques to write performant code? FacilTech, we have very good news. Garbage collection is already done with Young Space Scavenger and Parallel Mark Sweep, and you don't need to lift a finger because it's all abstracted away.
I've never had to worry about it. That was going to be my answer to this question. Is I've never had to worry about it.
It's one of the greatest things in Dart. It's one of the reasons Dart was chosen, because widgets in Flutter are under the hood immutable. So what ends up happening is every single frame, when you replace widgets, the ones being replaced get trashed. And the garbage collector is very good at picking up lots of small objects. What I mean by that is widgets are composed. It's all composition pattern. So each one of those things that compose a widget, of course, is an object, and the GC is good at getting rid of just about all of them, all of them. But the fact is that it's so very performant. It's a huge, huge factor in what allows Flutter to hit 60 frames per second very consistently.
I mean, it brings up one of the things that's just a lot of fun about Dart is just about anytime someone complains that, oh, Dart doesn't have this feature, you can trace it back to that need to be performant and be very, very thoughtful about how our language is done in such a way that we're not adding things we have to take away, that we're being very careful to make sure we do it in a performant way, things like that. So I mean, this is one of the examples. But pretty much every time I hear someone complain, that's actually the answer.
It's kind of interesting because it's one of those things I would point to in 2018, where when we were at conferences talking to Android developers around, Flutter, and it's like you get these new features that are in the GC that's only been in there the most recent versions of Android, but they're shipped inside your app because you're shipping a garbage collector as part of your app. You don't have to rely on the platform one, right?
Android had a huge update in its GC in 2018. Which they dropped the same thing that basically Flutter had for a year and a half before that.
But that's 2019, I think. But anyway, the point here was that you still couldn't use it, right? Because you would have to target that version and above, right? So your minimum would still be last year's version. You would need to support like 3 years, 4 years worth of devices, maybe, right? So there was always this thing in Android development, which was don't allocate during on draw, right? Because you'll be allocating objects every single frame at 60 FPS, guaranteed, right? It was just hugely inoptimal, right? And now they've got Young Space Scavenging and a few other things. It's not an issue anymore, right? But again, you have to be targeting that version above. Otherwise, the people with older devices get really terrible performance, and the ones new get the better performance. Anyway, doesn't matter. I wanted to just share this. This is your definitive answer to your question. This is by I forgot his name now. Oh my goodness me.
Vyacheslav Egorov?
Yes, Slava, yeah. And he works on the Dart team, and
that's the same person who did the original. The one where we turned the phone.
Yeah. No, that's a different person.
Smooth rotation. I thought he did the original smooth rotation.
No, that was a designer. Same name, different person. Anyway, so the point here is that this is your definitive guide to the garbage collector. It is not up to date. There is a markdown file somewhere in the Dart SDK. I can't find it. I know it's there. That talks about garbage collector. But this, in its absence, this is more detailed anyway. Object representation, handles, safe points, scavenging, parallel scavenging, mark sweep, all the lovely information, how it works internally, everything. you got it. This answers your question about how the GC works and share the knowledge. This is my go-to. So that's what I suggest you take a look at.
But again, other than curiosity, do you need to care at all?
Apart from like own knowledge gain and everything else, I've never once had to really concern myself. Well, I was doing some pretty heavily performance stuff that GC did matter in the way the objects were done. I've done it a couple of times, but yeah, there you go. There's another expression. Yeah, Slava did a Flutter and Friends presentation on Dart. I could go find that, I think.
And I would say my practical answer about the garbage collection in Dart is make sure you dispose your controllers.
Oh, yes. Yes. Make every controller go away when you're on dispose.
What's fascinating is a lot of the history of this came from the Java hotspot compiler, which was written by Gilad Bracha, who also worked on the early Dart team. So the knowledge has been brought forward. Originally, Smalltalk 80 had all this. And so that was brought forward for the hotspot Java compiler, which became the standard Java SDK. And then, of course, same people coming forward got the same brilliance. It's definitely bleeding edge technology.
And speaking of different languages,
right? I just saw
I
that
have
comment.
no idea.
Yep.
The only language dumb enough that you drive on the parkway and park in the driveway. So, all right. Moving on. What do you think about using Dart as a backend language, and is it possible to suggest a package to use? You have so
And next
many
week,
choices.
stay tuned next week.
Next week,
Next week.
for sure.
Dart
Yeah, your
frogs.
early
server
alphabet
pod.
week. Yep.
My practical answer to this is if I were developing a backend, I would want to use Dart for it because I know Dart very well. If I were at a company or I was hiring someone to build a backend, and I had a backend team, and I didn't necessarily need to share code back and forth, I don't know that I'd have much of an opinion on it. But if I'm using Dart for both front end and back end, I can share code. I can, and once again, since you're asking us in a Flutter environment, we know Dart. So using Dart makes a lot of sense when we can. That's my practical answer.
There's a consistency to it. I mean, you've got your head in one language and you don't have to change.
Yeah.
I've made 4 projects now that use Dart on the back end over the last 2 and a bit years, I think, maybe 3 years now. And yeah, it's definitely possible. And suggest a package to use. I mean, you don't really need the package. You can just use Shelf right out of the box if you want to. It depends on what you're doing, right? And you talk about backend. Well, I don't know, like what is your backend entail, right? That's the real question. Now, there's several new packages out there. Globe, Server Pod. Come on, guys, give me. There's quite a few Flutter like backend packages now. Dart Frog, yeah. There's a few of them around, and Shelf is like the one that was made by the Dart team at the beginning for this exact purpose. So,
yep. Lots and lots and lots of possibilities.
Yeah.
Plus, a server is one of the things that is an option when you create a new project.
Yeah.
All righty. Moving on here. One thing I do want to bring up real quick. I need to find it though.
Raf just recommended a list deck. I would not recommend Conduit. Conduit relies on non-compiled code still. I think it works on reflection still. So yeah, it has to run in not AOT mode, just-in-time mode, right? So you're not going to get the performance at your back end that you expect. So just
regarding the next question. Just saying. And
Yeah.
guess what? Randall, you're getting this one. What is the best
It's
folder
because
structure?
Randall- Yeah.
Yep.
It's
the
'cause
best
Randall told
folder
me to do it.
structure. Go for it, Randall.
Whatever works.
Great. Let me
I
make sure
literally
this
gonna
is
say,
turned off. Okay.
the folder
I'm
structure
turning
that
it-
works for you, that helps you find the stuff that you're looking for.
The thing
I
that
mean, I
I'm,
know it's facetious to say that, to be fair, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah, but I
The
mean,
most important thing is the most important thing is not to be too much committed to rigor.
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
happy if I find a folder that has only one file in it. I'm like, that's overkill.
Yeah.
So basically, I end up creating like a top level folder that will have my view and my controller and all that until it gets to the point where that's too complex. And then I start breaking them out into subfolders. But I typically will just have the top level features, one folder for each, and that's it for a little while, at least while I'm still developing the feature, the functionality.
yeah, and you might have like maybe a top level folder for like utilities or widgets or something which is global throughout all those
core.
features.
I have
yeah, got
I
core.
call it
Yeah, you
core.
could have a core feature that does
Yeah.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But
Now,
something
and
that
so
go on.
yeah.
Well, this is clearly somebody who hasn't had this discussion before. We do have a couple of useful answers rather than just philosophy that really doesn't help you. First, if you're using block, then you are going to be forced into a kind of a Redux-ish kind of structure. But as far as the rest of them go, there are two main ways that people do it. One is packaging by type, and one is packaging by feature. By type, you get like a folder with your widgets in it and a different folder with your pages. If you're going by feature, then you've got a folder that's features and one for your home page and one for your settings page. And any widgets that are unique to a page are in the folder for that page. Any widgets that are used in multiple places do go in a folder that is widgets that's not inside of the features folder. This is just one way of doing it. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just pasted my favorite article from Andrea, who's
I was just about to bring that
wonderful
up.
GDE. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
I have it on a hotkey.
Yes.
I have it on a hotkey, man. So it's
and that's
relative
right.
to me.
Andrea's got a different one with
Yeah, I've just posted
what is it? Presentation and data.
That's the one
That's
that one Randall posted.
That's
This
the one
one's
I
only
put in.
about
The
structure.
one
That's the
about
third one.
using RiverPod. Yeah, right.
Yeah, this one's just about like these two options we're just talking about. But I just briefly want to talk about just so you can visualize it. There's an example of the layer approach by like type, maybe data layer, domain layer, application layer, and your features inside, or the opposite round. Sorry, wait a minute. No, this is another organization where it's the opposite way around. Features, you have your feature, and then you have your things inside that, right? But at the end of the day, is if you can't find what you're looking for, it doesn't matter if you've gone the wrong approach right now. Change it. You can just refactor your code. You can just search, rename. You can just do replacing all files, package code, and whatever. Change, just rename your locations of where your stuff is. Move it
And one
around.
of the benefits of doing it by feature instead of by type is if you're dumping a feature, then of course you do a commit so that you can roll back. Hint, hint. But you can just turn around and delete the directory. If you have a page that is for the user to choose their favorite cat and you're not going to use it anymore, you should be able to just delete that whole directory under feature, because any widgets that were common between that and anything else should be in the widgets folder. So anything inside that feature folder should be self-contained and you can just make it go away.
Yeah, I mean, composability is kind of the dream with some of these things.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a step in that direction. One thing I'd kind of say is that if you're the one that's been working on the code and you know it well, with the modern IDEs, it doesn't matter where you put anything because you're going to be able to find it, you know, with a modern IDE. But it matters a lot when you bring in new people.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, and so someone that doesn't know, having the comfort of knowing where to go to find stuff is good. One of the things with going with like a feature kind of structure, in theory, is also that it's going to be, you know, less collisions when you're working on something. You know, so if you have a team of multiple developers, you know, you're gonna have less, in theory, collisions happening. I don't know if I've practically seen that, and I can tell you that just like naming things is hard, figuring out which feature it is also hard sometimes. You know, you're working on things and it's like, well, where do I want to put this? Do I want to put it as part of this or that or whatever? And so um, I often find myself almost doing a hybrid. So like if I've got my list of custom components, I've got my components directory, and then I've got my features, which are the different types of components inside that, with all the parts that go with that kind of a thing, whether it's the validation routines or the you know, or you know, we in our configuration we carry around some metadata, stuff like that. Those types of structures exist in that feature underneath that components part. You know, so that's you know, so it's not even then it's not in everything kind of thing. You know, so.
Boy, we've got 14 questions in the queue.
Yeah,
so
so we're about
probably
to
ought
have to
cut it
it.
off.
And I've got a
But
couple.
to wrap up the current one real quick, there are 4 common ways to structure things. The one you just saw from Andrea, then by type, by feature. And again, if you use block or Redux, Flutter block or Redux, you're going to end up in a particular folder structure that works with those. So, but there is no right answer. Okay. The answer is what works for you. You can make a hybrid of them. You might find some other way that works. But yeah, it's all about being organized.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind and go from there. So let's see here. And we do already have the gists in the queue. Boy, Facilitech, you've got a lot going on here, and I don't think there's a lot about tech that's easy. But what is the best way to implement sockets in a Flutter app to keep performance in mind? I get a lot of UI jank as I continuously update a widget based on new values. A lot of UI jank.
I'll be honest with you, I've done this and I've never got that.
Yeah.
And maybe you're getting it in because you're in developer mode and you know you're doing a lot more, or you're logging out lots of stuff. I mean, you've got to be doing a hell of a lot on your main thread in one go to skip a frame. Now you can do that; it's possible, right? So let's say you're getting data off the socket and you're doing a lot of parsing, or it's a bulking data, like you're receiving a huge megabyte of data a frame. Then yeah, you're gonna like potentially skip a frame. The way you solve this is with an isolate. And there's just isolate.run, and you give it a function. And then that function, the way to do this is to actually you create what's it called? A port. Sorry, a port where you can actually have a message channel. So you create an isolate in the background that maybe runs, opens up the socket, does all the stuff for the server, and does all the parsing. And once it's got the new data, it shifts it over the port to the front end UI thread, UI isolate to display. There's examples of this in the documentation. You know the ones. It's a JSON parse or something, isn't it called? Parsing JSON in the background. I think that's the one that has a good example of this, right? So I've dumped this in the link in the chat as an example, right? But I know it goes through like an example here of how you actually end up doing this. I think they end up just doing like, they use the compute function, which is the same as isolate.run now. And it basically is use this function with this content and return the response. And then that offloads this function past photos to the backend thread, essentially to the backend isolate. But obviously that doesn't work if the actual amount of data you're dealing with is just it's huge, right? Like at some point you'd be doing too much that it skips a frame. So but there's plenty of other information on working with isolates and how you do that kind of stuff. I'm really curious what you're doing for Facilitech. Perhaps perhaps you can share like gist or other things that we can maybe advise more, because I'm not seeing it, honestly. Like, you've got to be doing I feel like it's really interesting, right? Like, when was the last time you guys had to do an isolate to solve this problem? Yeah, you might be getting UI jank because of other issues, right? Like you're talking about, it's not probably anything to do with the network sockets or the performance on the backend thread, but mainly how, once you update the information, how you rebuild the UI and what you're doing. That could be affecting.
And this might be a great time to profile your app.
Yeah. So inside the profile tab in IntelliJ's plugin, you get a view widget builds per frame. And that's a nice way of just seeing like what widgets are being rebuilt in the last frame and how many total. So you can see, are you overbuilt? Are you rebuilding too many widgets that you weren't expected to rebuild, right? Rebuilding widgets is not in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's what leads on from that. So if that build then leads on to a layout that leads on to a drawer, suddenly you're just, and that's even with layout, especially with layout builder, you end up like doing a lot more work than you realize. Yeah.
And it's probably worth mentioning. I mean, we've been talking about isolates and stuff. It's worth mentioning, it's like many other things. There's one UI thread. So everything you're running normally is in its own isolate, which is the UI one. And so if you've got something like taking your JSON and deserializing it, or anything else like that happens because you got this back and you're needing to do a lot of logic, that's all going to happen in block until it's done. And so that definitely can cause jank.
So there is a key to that, right? So how you build your parsing logic, you can build it with async and await and futures. So you're passing chunks of your stuff in coroutines, and that way it will spread it out over many frames and not jank your UI. You don't need an isolate, right? It will maximize your main thread usage and without causing you UI jank.
Right.
All righty. Here's a fun one. Is Flutter supposed to encapsulate Android development, or is it a tool to make Android or hybrid development easier? Flutter is a UI toolkit that compiles for Android, iOS, desktops. So really it gets a canvas and draws to that canvas. It's very much like a game like Clash of Clans or something, where it gets a canvas and draws all of its own custom stuff. It's just that it looks like an Android app or an iOS app.
It's just to be clear, it's not like an Android canvas. Just
yeah. And
GPU.
Right. I want to give a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek answer and say yes. It really is supposed to make it easy to develop for Android, iOS, everywhere else. So we can do that. In which case, I would say that does encapsulate everything about Android, because we can do it all pretty much in Flutter.
Yeah, but it's not wrapping the Android code though.
But it also is meant to be able to, if you want to start doing it, and you've got, like we talked about earlier, I mentioned it earlier, if you have a huge Android base, there are options to start using Flutter to help work into that. And especially if you've got Android and iOS, two different things, there's a way to start working into it without, to make the hybrid development easier, to use something like Flutter and start plugging it in. So I really would kind of say yes to both.
I was going to say, well, I don't know why. When I read this, I'm like, why or?
Yeah.
Right. It's not a tool meant for any one of these things. It's a tool for building apps.
Yep.
Full stop. It just so happens that you can do Android development with it and you can do hybrid development with it.
And Danielle, I happen to realize the way you phrase things, I think people who have never heard of add to app might not understand it. Do you want to expound on that for someone who's never heard of it?
Sure. So it's the way to, I would also maybe say, if you're familiar in a web world, it's sort of like having an iframe kind of thing, but it lets us have the ability to add features to an existing Android app or existing iOS app, and you can write those in Flutter and keep your original code and then start. So that means that some of it you may never change, or some of it you may be changing. You may aspire to make it all Flutter. But you would do it kind of as you're adding things or rebuilding it and stuff like that. You can do that. Otherwise, you don't need to touch old code that you don't need to touch. And it lets you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So you can put some Flutter widgets, Flutter pages inside of an Android app and have them both in one app.
Exactly.
And that's the idea, is you can transition an app gradually, bit by bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Put a screen, fragment, view.
Right. Yeah. So you've got the ability to add it in, and it's a way to, if you're Flutter curious even, and you've got Android or iOS code, you've got the ability to actually do something real with it and try it out in the framework of what you already have. And it's maybe not as easy as just having a Flutter app, designing something with Flutter in mind from the beginning, but it lets you do it. And it's, yeah.
All righty.
Next. I think I've got to head out. So thank you all for having me again. I will see you.
I'm starting to get there myself.
Yeah.
About an hour and a half is my usual cutoff, but Danielle, thank you for coming.
Of course. How many hours until I see them again, Randall?
66.
Okay.
166.
166. Yeah. Thank you.
There we go.
Bye.
See ya. All righty. What do you think of macros?
Yes.
Good
Love
thing.
Them. There you go.
Good thing.
It's going in the right direction.
Soon.
Yes.
Soon.
There are a lot of people actually who are very, very excited about them.
It's been so this has been a known, like you can do so much with code generation, right? Like it's not a bad thing, right? You can do so much. What's a bad thing is if you need to use it almost like a CLI application, which we do right now with code generation, which is you run it and then you lose all the state, right? Like you're losing your state of each time you have to run that tool, it has to rebuild from almost from scratch. But if you can keep that code generation running all the time, so when something changes, it updates the generated code, it's a lot quicker because it's already got the known state. It uses the language server built in. It knows all the classes and if these things exist. It's super quick. So this is where macros comes in. It allows us to move forward with code generation and do a lot more things, right? We can augment our classes. Yeah. That, I mean, honestly, the whole like with extension types, extension classes, macros, and patterns, it's just such a powerful language now. It's ridiculous.
All right. Data tables don't have lazy loading. How can we achieve it? Possibly.
Use paginated data table.
Yeah.
So it displays a page at a time. You can go between pages and you just keep loading more, right? Like the fact of the matter is data table and paginated data table follow material guidelines, and that is how they're built. So that's what you get. If you want lazy loading on something like a data table, you're going to need to go find a package for it. I can't think of one right now. You can do it. The problem.
There was an answer in the chat. There was an answer in the chat.
Oh, yeah?
It's use the two-way scrolling grid now.
You can do that. You can do that, but again, you have to render the stuff yourself, right? Like you have to. Yeah. There's a bit more to it than that, right? However, it's one of those things that it's not all that simple. So let me explain where things fall short and why it's a very difficult thing to achieve. Most people don't realize. So, let's say you've got a spreadsheet and you've got a column in that spreadsheet, and it's got values that are like strings of text in a column, and some of that text is 1 character, some's 5 characters, some's all the way up to 100 characters wide, right? You load the first 10 items that does not contain anything larger than 3 characters, so the width of your column is little, right? And as you scroll and it loads more, suddenly you've got more information that you display, and the width needs to change, right, to encompass that. So now as you scroll, stuff jiggles around on the screen. It just doesn't work. So it means you have to pre-calculate. It's the same problem we talked about earlier with scrolling. You have to pre-calculate the pixel width of that column based on the entire data set. It's just not practical when you've got large data sets, right? You can't go to the server and fetch all that data set. The whole defeats the purpose of lazy loading. So to have it's all about building the right UI for your right data in the way that you want to access it, and not just make it do whatever you want, because it's not practical, right? So you either use fixed column widths, or you and you can like paginate and scroll, and it stays within those bounds, right? There's a bunch of things you need to do basically around that make it right for your application.
And apparently paginated data table is not helping.
I don't know what to say when it is the exact same that paginated is. But yeah, two-way scroll view, that will put you in the right direction. So there's a whole set of videos that came out for two-way scrolling, and there's some examples and a couple of articles around two-way scrolling, if I remember rightly. I can't remember two-way scrollable. I literally just put it in. Oh my
Just
God.
because Simon's a Googler when it comes to this doesn't mean he's a Googler.
Yeah, we none of us work for Google. I just put in. This is the first thing that came up with like Stack Overflow answer, blah 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 blah, and then the first answer is wrap it in a single chart scroll view. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's a no. That's a downvote. No.
Yeah.
Oh. So two-dimensional scroll view. That's the one, isn't it? Yeah. There you go. That's the one I was looking for. Two-dimensional scrollable viewport. And the viewport built, if I remember rightly, the builder child delegate. You have a builder delegate, and then the builder function, you're going to get your vicinity and context, and this tells you what the vicinity of your child is, which gives you the X and Y indexes, so you can return back the right widget for that place in the viewport.
All right, I'm going to skip a couple here because I want to touch on this one, and then I'm going to have to go. But
we'll come back to the ones we missed.
Yes. How can I make fonts responsive in Flutter? I've used the sizer package, but it's not been very effective. And the first thing that comes to my mind is never, ever, ever mess with the text size, because the users have their own accessibility things set. Honor them. Let the user do that. Especially, what is the one? Text scale. Never use that, because that will override the user's accessibility settings and make the user very mad, and they will uninstall your app.
And
so they fixed it. So they fixed the whole text scanning stuff. So what you used to have is, let's just go find it in the docs here, and I'll show it to people. Text, was it text style? Or was it? No, it was, let's just do default text style. Trying to remember the parameters now. I'm not sure if I'll find the
scale should be in text.
No, it's media query. Media query holds the default text. Was it text scale factor? It's going to be removed soon if it isn't.
Text scale of?
No, that's something.
Oh, scalar. Yeah.
This is it. Text scale factor. So text scale factor has now been deprecated to solve this problem. So the new replacement is text scalar, and text scalar allows for non-linear scaling, and it allows us to apply other types of scaling. Font scaling strategy is for laying out textual content. describes how textual content should be scaled for better readability. The scale function computes the scale of the font size for given the original unscaled font size specified by the app developers. And by default, the one that we have is linear. And this is just the compatibility of the original text scale factor, which we still use and use this new system. But the idea is that you can just override the text scaler and create your own class, instance of this class, and then put in the scale function yourself to do whatever you want. However, why? Right? This is what it comes down to. Like, make your fonts work, and then you want it to be responsive, which is this more okay? Hang on, hash up. Is this more okay? I think I know what the problem is. we're maybe misreading this. This is more about like responsive design. So this is like,
Yes.
oh, on a small screen, I want the smaller font. On a large screen, I don't want that. Maybe I want to make it larger, or you can do those. But I mean, like, just choose some breakpoints and then change your font sizes. Like, that's what a theme is for, right? So you have theme extensions. Create a theme extension.
If you're going to do that, though, I'm
Should we
thinking
do
you would
this?
probably want to use a layout builder.
No.
To figure out how. Well, hang on, because if you're going to change the size of the font, you need to know the size of the parent.
No.
Not the size of the screen.
No. You're doing it based on that. That's the point. This is the problem that people fall into, right? Like, it's one thing to say, if you size something like text to fit the visual portions of your screen, you're doing it wrong at that point, right? Because then you're saying, oh, when my widget's really small, my text is really small, I can't read it, right? When the text should be larger and wrap or go into multiple lines or do whatever it needs to, like marquee and scroll, right? The things that make it still legible, but work better in the various screen sizes, right? That's where
right. But what I meant was that the breakpoints are that you mentioned are on the widget size. Not that it should be a percentage of, which would make it like
it would in this instance it would be on the either the type of device or the screen size, right? You're saying like, so it's, for example, when it comes to web or desktop, it's your viewport size, right? For your view. And that would be your window, your desktop tab, for example, in your browser. So then when that goes smaller in width, or like you load the website on a phone versus on a desktop, you go, oh, the breakpoint change, the width of the device changed. Okay, now I should load a different font size or a different set of font sizes. And so this is more about having a text style, a text theme, right, and applying the right text theme for the right breakpoint. Right, and we can actually do this. If you got a hard stop, Randall, you're muted.
Let's start getting back out too, because it's I've got work to do.
Yeah,
but I want to get my question answered before I go.
Yes, okay. Yours is next. As long as you don't ask it again, then I'll put it at the bottom.
I'm going to make a note of this one. I feel like it's something that people don't know about and people are interested in. Okay, I'm going to put a little thing out into the chat. Are people interested in this whole text scaling and how you do it properly and with responsiveness and that? If it is, then we'll I'll put something together. We'll do something somehow. I'll figure it out.
All righty.
Today,
well, I am going to split.
Okay.
You all have a wonderful week. I will see you in 160 some odd hours. But yep. Have fun.
See you.
All right. So here's my question. So, and this is a work related question, actually. Apparently we've had a bug file that when a user receives a notification on their mobile device, clicking on the link is opened in the local browser and not handled by the native application. What should I be looking at to try to solve this?
On what platform? Android,
iOS
iOS?
and Android. Yeah, maybe both.
So first of all, I haven't used any of the new deep link debugging tools. Carry that. Okay. They're there. I think they're great to have because it's something that always goes wrong. And this is the type of thing that you use them for to solve it. So I'd say go invest in my first thing for anyone would be go invest in watching the videos and the information around the new debugging tools, learn how to use them and use those. if that's not helpful in debugging and finding the problem, essentially do the manual, which what I would be doing now if I didn't have those debugging tools, which is I'd go in and validate. So you've got validate deep links. There's tools online that help you validate deep links. You pop them in. You pop in your team ID from iOS, your bundle ID, and your package name from Android, and it'll query your website and validate that deep link is hooked up and working correctly. Which I think
we did all that.
do.
We've done all that. Is there any other way
validate
the notification?
Validate they're correct. That's the first thing, right? Validate
Sure.
they're correct. That removes that from being the problem, right? The other thing is when you receive that notification on the mobile device and they're clicking on the link provided. So is this like when you say notification, it's a push notification, or is this like a text message?
I believe it's an FCM.
See, an FCM would open your app, and the app should be handling that.
Right. So this is okay. So it's just spooky so far, and we don't have an obvious answer for me.
Well, no. It's just because it's complicated, right? Like there's many ways to skin this fruit, right? So the point here, though, is if you're clicking on FCM notifications, opening up a browser, that's got to be the way that the push notification is being configured and sent. I would assume. I think there's a link option. We should have a look at this. This is FCM, shall we? Let's have a quick look. Message model. I forgot
So you're saying that maybe the FCM is formatted wrong and it's not being interpreted properly as a deep link.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about yes and no. So let's just have a quick look. So when for the life of me, I need to find the freaking thing. So there's a reference. This is what I'm looking for. So when you let's lay this out a little bit better. Is that any better? I don't know. Make it bigger. Is it bigger? Why have I got this? There we go. When you send a message, on the platform, you can send it with like data and like custom data fields which you get inside your app. You can also send it with notification, and then you can also send it with Android web APNs, and these are the specifics for Android, for web push, or for Apple push notification service, right? So Apple, for example, you can then specify extra headers that are relevant for Apple, like APN's expiry, the custom payload, and then custom so payload here can be payload key reference. This is be APN. So this is like Apple specific stuff, right? Like category game invitation. There you go, right? Whatever it might be. So I'm assuming that perhaps there's a link option somewhere, which is like automatically launching the link. Maybe that's how it's been formatted when it's been sent, which means it might be evading the default behavior. I forget. I feel like I've seen that in here somewhere. So that would be my first.
Yeah, that sounds vaguely familiar, but yeah.
But saying that, it's a case that if this is an iOS project, you need to have your associated domain set in and your entitlements set up correctly inside your Xcode project, right? Mm-hmm. That's how Xcode knows to go look at the website for the Apple file. I can't remember
the well-known directory or whatever it's called.
Well, well-known is Android, and then there's another one for Apple. There's like a separate Apple one. But anyway, the point here is that's how it knows how to hook it up, right? And know that your link that was made by your app is like the website agrees that this is a link for your application, right? If it doesn't do that, if that doesn't agree, the default to opening up a link that would normally be a deep link is open it in the browser, which is what's happening. So my thought here is that it's just not configured and validated correctly to actually open it up, so it just defaults to the browser. However, the app itself, you don't need to do that. You don't. Well, I don't know. You shouldn't need to do that. But yeah. So the other side of this is, Randall, is if you get a link So let's say someone taps on notification, and you get the deep link coming into your app, right?
Yeah.
You get the launch event take place. Yeah. See, here's the thing. Like, okay.
Yeah,
So
I don't know how they can
I
get to the.
I just need to explain something. So this is for you and for other
Yeah.
people, right? So this is just so, because it's so flexible. It can also be so confusing, right? Okay.
Mhm.
Push notifications. When you send a push, it is just like a JSON blob, right? Blah, blah, blah. Right? That is literally how push works across the board, right? However, if you send in that JSON blob the right parameters for title and message, it will automatically display there's a notification to the user. Tapping that notification opens the app. That is it. There's no deep link, there's no special behavior, there's no nothing, right? And you'll get delivered that message and its associated data that you're given. It's up to you to interpret that data and your code to do that. That's how it works. You can also do what's called a data push, which is a push notification without those notification title and message in the way it's formatted for FCM, for example. And what will happen is your app will, as soon as the push is sent out and received by the thing, your app will start up and be given the message. Then it's up to you to interpret that content and create a local notification for that. Attach the picture. Go fetch the user's profile. Go get the other user's profile image and put that in the notification, whatever the hell you want to do. But as part of doing that, you can set up the deep link to open when that notification is pressed. And then when they press on that notification, it will then launch your app with that link as the data URI for the application. That will then be handled by Unilinks or the other deep linking package to actually open up that content and work like normal. There is no magical, like you tap on a notification and it will deep link into the app. Like it will open up the app, but it won't like automatically go into a certain section inside the app.
Okay.
So
And something like GoRouter already handles some of this launch stuff.
Go Router does not. No, well, again, it's complicated, and this is why the whole debug tools exist, right? If your app is already running, but backgrounded, it gets given the new data URI, but then Flutter by default just ignores that. It doesn't do anything with it. If your app is started up with a URI, then it launches as the initial URI for your router, and then it will be respected and build the stack.
Okay. All right. That gives me some hope, but I'm still not sounding like it's going to get solved today.
Deep links are always a pain. They're really hard to debug. You can actually there's a couple of just do deep links for each platform. Don't think about Flutter deep linking. Just think of it as a platform specific thing, because you can get deep links working without Flutter, right? Like it's immaterial to Flutter, right? Like you could just do an activity and validate that it's all working correctly, right? But the point here is there's some commands that you can run. I know with ADB, just look at the Android stuff for there's a command you can run. It will actually tell you which of your deep links have actually been validated correctly and which ones haven't. You need to add like app links verify true or something to your intent filter, for example, on Android, for it to actually even open up those deep links. If without that, it'll just open them up with like the browser. Yeah. So anyway, it's a minefield, and that's why having the debugging tools is a godsend.
Okay, that sounds great.
I wish it was just
have
run and do, but it's not.
And having asked and gotten the answer to that, I'm feeling queasy, so I need to go lay down.
Head off.
So we'll have to call this at the end of the show. I'm
gonna continue with the last few questions to get them
okay.
Off
all right. Well,
head off.
Thanks for the answer,
worries.
And I'm gonna be out of here.
Cool. Awesome. See you again soon. Right, let's get these last few questions done, because I'm apparently last man standing. But I do want to make sure that we get them answered. So let's see what we can do. If I'm listening to 10,000 images, for example, and I only show 20 of them, oh, this is the scrolling question. then the user scrolls rapidly. What can I do if I don't want to show a loading and I want it to be already loaded if I scrolled? I mean, it's what we just said, right? So well, okay. So let me just do the top level here, right? So the base level, whatever. So when you when a scrolling widget is created, it has a cache extent, and this is basically how much. List view has this as well. I was actually thinking of one of the other widgets, actually not this one, but anyway, cache extent on all the scrolling widgets. That tells it how much to load that's outside the viewport and start loading, right? But the problem here is if you scroll rapidly, you don't want it to start loading everything and have it already loaded, right? Now, if you want these like here's the things, Salem. Like you said, you got 20. You're showing 20, and you got 10,000, but you want them to just load automatically when they're in there. Well, you've got an option: load 10,000 thumbnails and have them really low quality that they can instantly load in. You've got you don't want to load 10,000 images. That's the whole point. So what are you asking, right? You don't want to show loading, but then you don't want to load them, right? Because it's expensive, right? So what are your alternatives? Really crappy thumbnails, like really low res thumbnails, so they don't take up a lot of space, but they use as placeholders until it loads the actual thing to make it feel a bit nicer. You can do use the cache extent to load more off screen. So if they scroll slowly, they're going to get that content coming in, right? You can also use what you spoke about earlier, which is hash. Okay, image hashes. What they're called. You should rewind the video. Danielle mentioned it earlier, but it's basically it's a blur hash. Blur hash. That's the one I was thinking of. Blur hash. Yeah. So blur hashes give you the blur hashes give you the a bit of data you put in, and it gives you like a blurry version of your image without actually having to download any image data. You just download this hash value that generates the blurry image basically on device. So look, it's better anyway. And as I said earlier, what was the widget? It was as it scroll away image provider. And this is what you want to use. And this stops the images from being loaded when you scroll rapidly, right? On purpose. So you don't load them. And this is probably what you're looking for, Salem. I think the problem you've got is when they use the scrolls, it takes ages to load the images. That's because it went off and requested everything above. And now you've got a backlog of requests that are trying to be handled by your app, rather than actually stop those requests until it should start requesting. And that's all done for you by the scroll aware image provider. So just use that. So basically, if you don't know, oh my goodness me, there we go, image widget. So the image widget has these constructors, if I can find them: asset, file, network. These are very common to use, but actually what this is doing is, where's the implementation? All it does is, it'll be the one time I want it. There you go. It creates a network image, right? As the I don't know if that's actually helpful or not. Hang on, sorry, I'm trying to. Why won't it get in front? Oh, it's off the bottom screen now. Great. Well, anyway, it creates a network image as its image provider. The normal constructor takes an image provider. So basically, what you're doing, you switch out. You use the image widget with an image provider. That image provider is your scroll aware one, and the scroll aware one has the constructor for network image, and network image takes the URL. So you're just basically putting a scroll aware image provider in between the normal one, right? It's super simple. It sounds more complicated than the way I explained it. It's like an extra constructor you just chuck in, and that will get you to the place where I think you want to be, which is you're not loading unnecessarily images, and it actually ends up being faster in reacting to the user's scroll. Hopefully that helps. Right. I think, was this the gist? B0? Yeah. So there we had a gist post. What was this question? If model class instance is passed by reference in a widget, then it would be the same on accessing the instances fields. Then it does make any difference by passing model.field B to C. I'm not quite sure I get your question, but I'm going to try my best. So you've got a model and you've got two, title and description, and you construct it during build. Probably not what you want to do, but okay. And then on B to C, I just need model.title, right? Yes, you're accessing the same memory location. Just because you're passing, I mean, all objects are passed by reference. There you go. It's the same instance. This is the same instance as this, which is the same instance as this. Make sense? Hopefully that helps. You're not copying that, and you can know that by looking at the hash code of the object. If you haven't overridden the hash code, right, which you haven't in my model, then you can get the hash code of the object. The hash code is its unique identifier in the VM, in the Dart VM. It'll be unique. It's unique for every object. And you can do was it identity? Where are we? Identity. Print. I didn't know. The one time I'm not with it today at all. Identity hash code. That's the one. That's what you want. So this will give you the, as it says there, the identity hash code of the object, as if the original object hash code was not overridden. And if that's the same for two objects, it's the same object. Yeah. So you can be guaranteed it's not been like a copy of the object or a manipulation. It's the same one. You shouldn't need to do that again. In this case, it's the same. Probably in this situation, I would probably, just to be clear, I would probably have this C object depend on title. If it does not depend on like model as a whole, then I'd probably have it to depend on title, and then this makes this widget a bit more flexible, right? But maybe a middle widget depends on model because it requires the entire model because it has several widgets that depend on separate features of the model, right? But equally, this works, and you can also do things like do like a provider, right? Like an inherited widget, and actually provide the model down the tree. So wrap your column in like a provider that provides my model, and then these widgets inside just happen to get it. And then you do a thing where they on purpose they crash out if they're being put in a context which doesn't have the model, right? Things like that. I mean that. Yeah, there's problems around that, like in terms of you're getting dynamic runtime behavior rather than static compile time behavior. So there's, yeah, anyway. Even passing the title, right? This instance of title is the same instance that was constructed here, which is this instance here, which ends up being this instance. In this situation, because you're doing it during build, you're going to get a different instance on each build, which is probably what you're seeing. You don't want to construct objects during build because you're not guaranteeing it's the same object then, right? And then this is going to get a new value, which essentially means you're rebuilding everything, right? It's a bit more complicated than that, but for the most part, yeah. Make this stateful, have this, bring it outside the build. That's it. All right, what was next? I'm not looking at the live chat. I should probably look at the live chat. Cache network. Instead of showing 10K images, well, he's not here. He didn't answer me, but hopefully that answers his question. Oh, there you go. Is passing a model and passing the model's filed? Same on the gist. Yes, it is the same on the gist. What do you think about using a shader in Flutter? Are they worth it, or should we use Flutter code? Manish, you're going to get to give me a bit more than that. Why shouldn't you use shader? What's the problem with a shader? I mean, use a shader because you want to use a shader. What do you mean using Flutter code? I mean, do you mean like? I mean, what are you trying to do? Like, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to do with shaders, right? I mean, you know, if you're trying to like do like a fragment shader where you're actually doing like pixel manipulation, yes, definitely use a shader. They're worth it because you offload into the GPU all that work per pixel. Otherwise, if you're doing a Flutter code, then you're doing it on the CPU, and then the CPU is a general purpose compute. It's not meant for pixel manipulation. It's not as performant, right? Also, if you offload to the GPU, now your CPU can be doing the other stuff that it needs to do per frame, right? And it doesn't, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to do graphics work on the CPU, right? At all, ever, right? Effectively, right? All right. I guess next, can I use scroll away image provider with cached network image? Yes, you can. Yeah. So cached, well, the package, but yeah, you can just use any image provider you want with it. So yes. I think if I remember rightly, the scroll aware image provider, which we lost here, scroll aware image provider, the implementation of which actually forwards on the keys. Yeah. Image cache contain the key, then resolve that same key. If scroll will recommend deferred, then it defers the resolving of the key. So yeah, this will be fine with the cache. Yeah. With cache network image. Next. With Simon Salih, Daria Manklis giving the first talks of FlutterCon in Power, how would I clone myself to watch them all? You just don't, do you? You have to pick one and see what happens. I still need to do my abstract. I've got a picture in my mind what I want the talk to be. I just need to work on it. So I still need to work very hard between now and the date to make sure we actually I have a talk to give. But be aware now. It'll be awesome and magnificent. We hope. I hope. Okay, Lucas gave us another gist. Yeah, so I took a quick look through this during the stream. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing here, right? So page that scrollable larger screen does not seem to be usable here. It's definitely usable here. Does not seem to be usable here. On the screen, there's an issue I'm facing that if I not use custom scroll view, this page does not render on iOS. The actual UI is a bit more complicated, but generally has about 10 to 15 children and roughly extends below the viewport 3 to 4 times. I think maybe you need to explain what you think by render. I mean, you scroll down, it doesn't render? Or do you mean like it's not building those widgets off screen? Because that's the whole point, right? The whole point is you're not constructing widgets that you can't see off screen. That's where the cache extent comes in, so you can improve that, right? But frankly, there's nothing in this layout that, this is standard. There's nothing in here that would stop. Is it that you scroll down and you can't see this, for example? Or you can't see some of these widgets, they don't get rendered on the screen? Or is it that they just, I don't know. I'm trying a hard time understanding what you mean. Or is it that you so something that you maybe is relevant. I'm reaching at straws here, but maybe is relevant to what you're talking about is keep alive. So where is it? Client mixing. So if you want your state of your widgets to stick around, right? If you want your state of your widgets to stick around once they've been scrolled off the screen, when they come back on to contain the same state, your state needs to implement automatic keep alive mixing. This will keep your element alive, and use your state subclass keeps your element alive, and then we'll reattach it to the right render object when it comes back in. So yeah, I mean that's it. Also, just to be clear, your list view, when you use list view builder or custom scroll view, any of those, you'll see that you've got add automatic keep alives. This literally adds keep alive widgets for each of the there's a couple of different widgets around this. I think it's just, is it automatic keep alive? Yes. So this is what it does. It adds add automatic keep alive, probably makes sense. And so what happens is the client mixin on your widget sends up a notification. The notification is just a term like a piece of model data, right, up the tree, and then this picks it up, and then again tells it to keep alive, right? And this maintains a keep alive widget, and this is what actually is being used by the scrolling system to actually keep those elements alive and know that it needs to keep these specific elements around, right? And there's the flag for that. So I actually built one of my own kind of keep alive things for something I was doing once. Anyway, I don't know if that helps. Maybe that helps get to the point. What else we got? What is the best logic for creating a user doc after registration using Flutter and Firebase without functions? Just create one. The point here is you need to put restrictions in place, right? So if you're using Firebase, then you're doing client-side business logic, right? So in that situation, you just need to make sure that when it's written to the database in Firestore, that they can only write a document with the right ID, and that document can contain certain information that's relevant to them. So that way someone can't game your system, right? Or write bad data to your database. But they do that with your Firebase rules, right? Yeah, I mean, just create a object, JSON, write the document into Firebase, and then just put the rule in place to say that only that person can write that document, that ID, like users collection, and the document ID is their user ID, right? It has to match the request. You can do that with Firebase rules. You can also restrict that the fields and data match a certain thing, right? Yeah, I'm not saying the best logic. I mean, you get told. So where is it? On the Firebase, was it Firebase auth? Where is it? Yeah, it's been seen. So on the Firebase auth package, when you get a response come back from sign in, say sign in with, I don't know, where is it? It's not sign in with password. It's just, no, sign in with email and password. That's what. Yeah. So let's say you're doing this, you get back as a user credential, and user credential tells you, is it this one? So it's this one. Okay, credential. Is it that one? It was the one time I want it, and it's changed. Additional user info. Yes, here it is. Yeah, you get a flag saying it's a new user, right? So you do your login, you get back, is it a new user? If it's a new user, then you create the user record. That's it. Now you have a user record in the system. That's if you don't use Firebase functions. The problem, that's why it's kind of nicer to actually, you could call they authenticate with auth, and then you could call a cloud function, and then that cloud function can then, or API, that cloud function can then it will create the document record and do whatever, all the stuff on the server side that's private, is not to be tampered with, creating their account and whatever else you need to do, notifying other users, sending out push notifications, whatever you need to do, and then returns the document to the user or the path to their document or something, right? Both work. It's just you have to be very careful about your rules on the front end. Whereas, if you do it with the server side, then you can basically just put your rules as restricted. No one can create anything on the front end, which is a lot nicer in terms of security policy, right? There's no chance of messing it up. Okay, let's see. Do we have any last minute questions in here? Otherwise, I do want to kind of like show that text scale stuff, but it's just really, I get pretty tired, to be honest. So I think, why don't, I said that this last time, I'm going to queue up, as soon as this is over, I'm going to queue up next week's show, and I'll queue up a live coding for later on in the week. And if people remind me, what was it? It was text scaling with breakpoints, yeah? Yeah, why not? Yeah. Right. Let's have a quick macros could help with dependency injection. Yeah, we can do macros, do a lot of things. Yeah, we saw that. Is it possible to send the Flutter widget tree in some sort of XML to other Flutter app for it to replicate the screen share functionality? Yes. There you go. I mean, the problem here is more about if the two apps are compiled the same, they're the same like app, they've got the same code, then yes, because then they can just use the same functions, right? So the package you're looking for is RFW, remote Flutter widgets. That does everything you need it to do. So that's what I would suggest. There is a gist that I wrote that does the same thing. That I could go find here. Hang on, this was inflator. That's the one. Which is a small. Where is it? Yeah, like 350 line example of doing this. We did it during a Humpday Q&A. So you can go watch the video. That also does something similar. Obviously, it's limited in scope. Like this only does like a handful of widgets and a handful of like colors and things. But you can expand it to be your own widgets and your own things, right? Like there's no problem there. What else we got here? Okay, interesting. Okay, go on stream. My question will be answered. Will my question be answered considered? Yeah, I just answered it. There you go. Yeah. Once I had to remove the scanning stuff before production, which was introduced by previous dev. Yeah, you want to be careful, like doing weird scaling and other things like that. Okay. What else we got? I'm trying to optimize the performance of Flutter component when loaded in a native app. Works exceptionally well. But however, when loaded in standalone web, it's too slow. It takes like 10 to 12 seconds. Yeah. Again, you can run the performance tools. I suspect what's probably happening is it's all about the widgets that you're making. So let's be clear. Web is not as direct as any native stuff, right? You've got a whole ecosystem and complex like layer of an application, which is the browser, sitting in between the native, like the raw operating system, if you will, and your app, right? Your app is also going through JavaScript, right? Which then has to be interpreted. It's going to be a lot slower, right? This would be the case with any JavaScript application and web application, right? So you're limited in what you can do. So this means that what would be really fast to do on a native app becomes suddenly really slow to do on a web app if you're not careful. And this is where people fall into a trap, going, oh, I can just take my Flutter app and make it work. You can, and it will work. It doesn't mean it'll be performant. You'll have to do tweaks to make it perform. And this comes into using like slivers for scrolling, right? So it doesn't render anything it doesn't need to do. It's not just performant because of that, because it's also about like the number of pixels. It's like making a website like on a fill up a 4K screen. It's a lot different to running it maybe on a 1080p like phone screen, right? That's 4 times the resolution you got to render. Using slivers so that you're only rendering what's necessary on the screen. Again, be cautious about what you're actually running. You can do worker threads like isolates in the background, but ideally you shouldn't be doing that much work in your client, right, to warrant that. From a website perspective, again, the difference between an app is that you have direct access to the hardware, and on a browser, like, you know, you can actually use the GPU, you can do video processing, you can do a bunch of stuff. Where on a web browser, you're limited to the web browser API set, and it's interpreted level stack, right? So one of the great things that we got going towards web for Flutter is that it now compiles to WASM. WebAssembler is as a lower level stack than JavaScript in the way that it functions. And it means you're going to get a better performance envelope overall instead of using JavaScript, right? Now, you can do there's experimental modes that you can turn on right now in the Let's Staple to compile to WASM and actually use some of these new things out. The other one would say, again, you know, like there's certain things you do and just don't do, right? Like it's a bit like, I don't know, that you know, there's whole teams of people that make YouTube performance so you can scroll through lots of videos and stuff, and they still don't play lots of videos on the screen. It's all like thumbnails, right? Like, yeah, there's things you do that you wouldn't like scroll through 1,000 videos and use the video widget, right, for everything, because it's just going to load in 1,000 videos and your browser's going to grind to a halt, right? So that would probably work better on a mobile, right, or an actual device. And this is the difference between building, say, a desktop app versus a web app, right? You build a desktop app, you've got that. It's the same as your mobile app, right? In that experience, right? You're building for the operating system, for the machine. You've got that power. You haven't got the interpreted level. That's why it's great to say, I would build for web, and you're going to get that experience from web, like instant updates and all those other things. But then you have a limited platform, right? It's not the same as an OS, and it never will be, right? And those standards can go out. All the browser vendors have to implement those standards. And then even once those standards are implemented, you're a limited subset because of the nature of the browser. And it's done like that on purpose as a sandbox environment, right? So yeah, just know where you're at with that. Anyway, if you haven't already, did someone else share a gist? Am I missing this? Let's have a quick look. I need to be very cautious about what I bring up on stream here. Hang on. Need to double check things before I bring them up, just in case. Bear with. Oh, is this the image thing? Yeah. I have 3 images that can be moved, pinched, rotated, scaled. Moving, pinching works fine. But when the image is scaled and rotated a little bit, the gesture is not working. Like I'm able to perform moving and pinching or rotating. Yeah, because the scroll has taken over, probably. It sounds more like you've got a focus / gesturing problem with the gesture arena rather than actually I mean, you could have just said this is your problem, right? Image is scaled, rotate a little bit with gesture is not working. That sounds like a bug with your. Let's have a quick look here. I'm not gonna dig too much into this right now. How you actually applying your. Wow. Okay. This. You don't need all this. Expanded in the column that you're scrolling. You're scrolling these vertically. Did you say? Was this scrolling? Did I miss something here? Was this some separate issue? I may have got mixed up. Anyway, let me. I probably got mixed up between two different questions. Sorry. But anyway, yeah. So this, if you're trying to move something around, you're better off using transform.translate, not positioned. If you're just doing this to position them on the screen, like in the grid or some other thing, yeah, use a proper widget for that. Don't use positions. Scale, rotation, on tap. I don't. this looks crazy to me, if I'm honest with you. I don't get any of this. You've got like a bunch of parameters here. On scale update. I see what you're trying to get at. I think what you're missing is transform takes a matrix and usually one matrix, and that's it for each widget. You don't need all this stuff to make that work. And then this should be made into its own widget, right? That you wrap. You can just make a transform widget that wraps your image. And in fact, someone's already done that. It's called photo view. I don't know if it does what you want it to do. So you can go look up the photo view package. I mean, there's a lot of gesture detectors going on here, which does not fill me with confidence. Like, you want one, right? That does everything you need it to do. So the thing here is it transform? You're probably not. I don't. It depends on how this has been implemented. Sorry, I'm. No, you need to do .dart, not .text, right? Let me get syntax highlighting. Right, we transform .flip, rotated box. Rotated box is probably where your problem lies. Also, yeah, like. Yeah. It's interesting, but this seems really complicated. If you want, we can look at refactoring this and showing a simpler way of doing it, but not now. We'll spin up another live stream later on in the week, maybe Saturday. Let's see what else we got in here. I mean, I'm not like. I mean, so let me explain what the problem. The problem normally is here is that once something is so transform is just rotating the view of the image. It's not rotating the touch input and other things, right? Like, your portion of your widget is still restricted to the touch of the area of that it's in. It doesn't get touch areas for, like, if you rotate, the corners won't be touchable suddenly if they paint outside of that clipped region. Like, they're essentially touch being clipped to the boundary of your view. There's ways around that, but again, it's all around what you're trying to achieve here, and anyway, the point here is it's the way it's been approached, probably not the actual widgets that you're using. All of this can be done with one gesture detector and one matrix, right? And when you do a custom, it might be worth. I'm trying to remember now. I feel like transform was the widget that had the parameter. Transform hit test. It does do that. So it's probably because you're using rotated box. Maybe rotated box does not do this for you. So maybe you can. There's a transform.rotate constructor. So convert your number of turns to radians and stick it in the angle parameter. Maybe that'll solve your bug. But yeah, this does seem a really overly complicated for how it's been for what you're trying to do. And without running this, I don't quite know why there's all these parameters and how it's been used. It seems a bit much. So perhaps we can come back to it. All right. Hopefully that helped. Sorry. Right. Shader made me cry, Math. Yeah. Everything disappears and there's only a white screen. I need context. Oh, this is the scroll view. Sorry. Yeah. Too many people. I usually just as it does above. Wrap your list view in a repaint boundary. Try that. I'd say that give yourself. There's probably something. Probably what's happening here is the surface of the surface that your widget's painting to is being rendered again over by some other widget without clipping. And the behavior may be slightly different on Skier versus this. It sounds like maybe it's an impeller bug, right? But without a use case, I can't picture that, right? I would say wrap it in a repaint boundary. And if you can make a small example that replicates this issue, particularly like even that one you just posted, make an issue ticket on the make sure you first of all using the latest stable, and then make an issue ticket. See if you can find an issue ticket first of all that has the same problem. If you can't, make a ticket on Flutter on github.com/flutter/flutter, and then put your example in there and explain how you need to compile it to experience the problem. What version of iOS or Android, or it's iOS, right? Impeller was it? What version it is? If this was this Android impeller, because that's still early days, right? So I suspect that to have a bug like this. But they want that to report it. So still bring that back. If it's Android, iOS, and then maybe a video clip, or you can capture a video or a screenshot of what's happening. All the information you can, and someone will look at it. Repaint boundary might help solve your problem though, because it creates a new layer around just that widget, and then any rendering will be contained within in the composition stuff. In the layer tree. Cool. Check support for WebAssembly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, ISA may not support it at the moment, but you know, I know Simon wouldn't say no to a PR around that. Like it's definitely something that is needed to make it move forward. Yeah, there's a lot of packages that won't install WASM yet, but it doesn't mean they won't ever, right? Like the point here is see what your thing supports. Maybe remove the packages and not use packages, because you probably, most people overly use packages and people's code when you're using maybe a small portion thing or something you can do yourself, right? Removing the dependence on external packages is only a good. It's for the most part is a good thing for an app, because there's less that can be broken by someone's external code change, less things you have to maintain. Like, yeah, just be aware. Dependency management is a thing, and you should be doing it, right? Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, it's what Christian was saying here. The positioned can actually move outside the bounds and so on. So there's a few other weird things that can take place. Do you prefer server pods? I've not tried it really in any good, meaningful way. I'd be meaning to, haven't found the time. Maybe if Victor's coming on the next show, which I believe he is, then I'll get a chance beforehand to do it. So other than that, I might ask Victor if we can do a little demo on the show and everyone can learn. Macros are they're out in experimental. I think you have to enable them. Yeah, you have to enable them. I feel like you have to enable them. Check the latest Flutter and Dart posts, right? So if you go to medium.com, let me. So medium.com/flutter. Let me bring this up. Then they are what's new in 3.2.2 and Dart.io, WebAssembly. I'm sure. Was it macro? No, it's the Dart one, isn't it? I think. Oops. Macro. Yeah, Dart macros. Yeah. So later on this year, preview. Yeah, it's a preview of macros right now. So you have to probably enable it or do something else, or it only works in a certain way. Read the post, and you'll find that you'll find the information you need. All right. Well, I think that about does it. Thanks for coming, and hopefully you got your question answered. And I'll arrange some further links. So you want to subscribe to the channel, and then you'll get the links, and we'll go from there, I guess. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you same place. Was it 165 hours now? Same time, same place next week. All right. Bye-bye. Bye.